We are with Hussein Kudrati, who to me is the international man of mystery, because you just never know where you're going to see him in the world. I feel like I can be in Dubrovnik and, I can turn a corner and Hussein's going to turn the corner and just say, oh, I happen to be here, like analyzing some real estate. Or I can be in Dubai or in Jamaica or in Costa Rica. I just feel like he can pull up anywhere and it's just not going to be surprising. So, Hussein, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm surprised you had me back, but let's have another good conversation.
Well, I think after the first one, you and I were going back and forth, I think, about the death of Canada or something.
I was sitting in my office and I overheard the little parts of it, and I was just like, what are those guys talking about back there? I mean, this is...
Well, we're born... Listen, our father is essentially our father declared refugee status in Austria. They wouldn't keep him. The church pulled him out through Germany, northern Germany. He got on a boat that the church paid for and basically said, you're going to Canada or Australia, you choose. He ends up in Canada, got here, hated the food, hated the weather, wanted to go home, was so poor, unfortunately, could not go home. So he got stuck in Canada. Our mom came from an interesting family background from Scotland. She flew over, was an immigrant. They met at Palais Royale on Lakeshore Avenue dancing because our father is a trained ballroom dancer.
Oh, wow.
So in Croatia, he had some people who took care of him in the northern part of Croatia that also did ballroom dancing. So he learned professional ballroom dancing. And so he put on a show apparently at Palais Royale.
He must have loved it.
Cleared the dance floor and I guess impressed and wowed our mom. They married. We exist because of this country.
They could barely communicate with each other, but they could dance together well.
The whole marriage, they could barely communicate properly. We love you, Mom and Dad. If you're listening, we love you. We love you. We're the products of this. So we have a lot to be grateful for. And the odds of just being born are minuscule, and the odds of a Croat meeting a Scot in Toronto at Palais Royale must be minuscule. So the country gave us our existence. So it's not like I really want to shit on Canada. It's just when you see things that could be better so easily, that's just what gets to you somewhat.
But again, and I saw some of the comments as well. People were like, oh, why are you guys attacking Canada?
Oh, really? You read the comments?
I just saw a couple because some of them were texted to me by saying, like, what are you doing?
Oh, jeez.
But again, for me, honestly, my response to that is, I don't think it's shitting on someone, because here's the way I look at it, right? If you don't care about something, you're not going to say anything. You'll sit there quietly and, live your life. I don't care. It takes time and effort to actually think about things and analyze an issue and think it. Because listen, a lot of us, have options not to be here. We choose to be here. We choose to invest and try to make things better in our own small way. So, and I think if you're not willing to criticize, and I think that's part of the problem, is you should be able to speak openly and honestly, and also hear the feedback, hear the counter arguments, because I think that's important too. Because it's not all bad. We just see areas of concern and counter it. If you think that we're wrong, then I'm open to ideas. I'm open to suggestions. If you think things are great, if you think the economy is going great, I'm open to understanding your perspective.
Yeah, and it's also different when you've seen something, you see what you feel is headed down the wrong direction. So it's not just like you came here like, okay, well, this sucks. Everything sucks about it. But it's like, well, you're like, well,
that's a good point.
I've been here for a bit, and now I feel like we've gone down this fork in the road, and the path that we're going down, the way, you're looking at it is like, hey, it's not so good. I feel like we should reverse a little bit and maybe take the other path. And I think that's where it's fair too. So it's not just coming in just saying like everything's shit, because if you're that type of person, you're like, oh, everything's shit. That's one thing. But if you're like, hey, look, from my observation, from what I've seen in the past, it doesn't look as good now. Here, I feel like we should be doing some things to fix it, and then trying to contribute to that solution. Then it's fine. Yeah, like to your point, why can't we have those discussions? We should be able to.
Agreed. And I think these discussions are important. I think more of them need to be had. So, Hussein, I appreciate you sharing the way you share. And I'm just curious, for anyone who doesn't know you or maybe didn't hear you on the first podcast we sat down and discussed together, your worldview, you're so fortunate that you went to Queen's. You went in England, you took, what did you take in England?
Dispute and conflict resolution.
In England.
And then I went to law school in California.
Yeah, so I think just that mix gives you a world. Where were you born? What country?
In Kenya.
You were born in Kenya.
And raised in Kenya as well?
Up to elementary school, and then I did secondary school in the UK.
Yeah, So it gives you context, a lot of context.
So your worldview gives you an interesting approach to analyzing Canada. Because if you're born in Mississauga like we were, and we were fortunate enough to travel, but if you haven't traveled much, haven't seen, I think when you leave Canada and kind of reflect back, it gives you like the ability to analyze a little bit more clearly.
Well, it's like any situation when you're in the middle of it, it's harder to see. Sometimes you have to remove yourself from it to kind of get a different perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
Without question. And honestly, like some of the things when you go on your travels, like I just came back from being in Iraq for about 7 days, and you see how people struggle, and you see this drive, and you see the effort that is being done, right? And you see like a 6-year-old kid or 7-year-old kid running a little store and, you know, trying to make ends meet, and you don't know his situation. It makes you appreciate what you have as well in this country, because there is, you know, so much security built in, rightly or wrongly, because of the safety net that's here. And I just think people need to realize when they complain also about the things here that it could be a lot worse, you know, but it's all about balancing out and understanding that, you know what, be open to other perspectives, be open to other ideas. And this whole concept of groupthink, that everyone has to think linearly, is part of the problem. I don't think that's a uniquely Canadian issue. I think that's just a social media issue where I find that humans want to see people who echo their own viewpoint. So if you go, and I often like to look at, like with close friends, I won't do this with like people I'm not close with. I'll say, let me go through your Instagram, or let me go through your Twitter. Who are you following? And invariably, a lot of people only follow either what they believe are neutral news sources, or they'll follow people who think like them, act like them, you know, echo their worldview. And I'm like, well, how do you get a different perspective if your entire source of information is simply reinforcing that you're right? And then it creates this thing that I know everything. I'm so smart. And people, and the last thing on that.
You're so right. You're so right. You create your own echo chamber.
Yeah. And then,
definitely guilty of that, because I follow a whole bunch of Bitcoiners.
Yeah.
So I'm cheering for Bitcoin at all times on Twitter.
There you go. Like, I mean, you need to follow some more fiat currency people.
Actually, I do follow. There we go. Actually, I do follow a bunch of them. So, okay, I am somewhat balanced.
There you go. Yeah. Just follow the central banks. There you go.
I do follow. Yeah. And lately, in the past, I was commenting whenever they post. And lately now, with the different laws and bills that are being proposed in Canada, I'm like, can I freely comment on the central bank here? Can I no longer comment? But I'm curious. I want to talk about Iraq in a second. But what you just said is important, because when I was younger, we used to read the newspaper. And the newspaper wasn't so siloed, because I would read the sports section. I would always want to see what's going on with the Blue Jays and that kind of stuff in the 90s. But after you exhausted the sports section, you kind of were forced to grab the other sections of the paper. So you would see world news. Mm-hmm. You would be forced to read about some businesses that you really weren't that interested in, but you were reading the paper when you're eating your breakfast or whatever you were doing. And now with the internet, you can silo in so exclusively on the content that you are interested in. You don't get exposed to these other news sources. So as crazy as it sounds that the old newspaper kind of gave you a better view of the world, I really think it did, because I was forced more to read opposing views and other views and the editorials and the opinion columns that now you can kind of just avoid, because there's an endless rabbit hole of your quote unquote favorite content.
I wonder if those opposing views still, so we got the Toronto Star at home regularly at that time. And yeah, there was articles sometimes I remember on each side of the page.
Yeah, arguing.
Yeah, it was like, editorials for and against something. And I just wonder if that even still exists. I mean, I don't read the paper anymore, but
the Toronto Star feels like it's gone down a weird path.
Yeah, and I think, has that happened to all media? Because something that I used to do for fun when during the last US election, when there was like some news story, I would go to Fox News and I'd see like what they were covering in the headline, and then I'd go CNN to see what they were covering. And it was amazing, to your point, to see like something that was main news somewhere is just like, and there's like the 6th, 7th story on the other site. Like, it was really interesting to see that dynamic play out, and it just made me kind of lose faith in a lot of it.
100%. And the other thing I see, again, done by both sides, is when they have to retract stories, it's like a tiny little footnote. Mm-hmm. I'm like, you blasted this as front page news and you had people believing it to be true. And when it was incorrect, you just basically said, okay, well, you know what? Oh, whoops, sorry, small print, extra small font. I'm like, that's not honest. Like, and then people don't believe the retraction. They just think that, they got bullied into the retraction or whatever. So again, people just want to keep believing and reinforcing what they want to see the world to be, right? And it's very interesting.
What were you doing in Iraq? Like, I don't know what you can and can't share. So I'm just curious. What were you doing there? What's the vibe in Iraq right now? Is it like the mentality of the people that you were engaging with? How are things?
So, like the sect of Islam I follow, like Iraq, in 2 cities in Karbala and Najaf, have some of the holiest shrines because it's where some of the most important people from creating Shia Islam are buried. And so it's a source of pilgrimage, and it was extremely vibrant. There's tremendous wealth just simply by the sheer volume of pilgrims that are coming in, on a consistent flow basis. And it was fascinating because I was worried about taking my children there because they were born in Canada and generally more accustomed to the Western way. And again, it showed me how much we tend to coddle our children because they were resilient and far more just like go with the flow, enjoy life, meet people, talk to people, smile at people, high five people. And it was just like, and you're like wondering like, oh, what are they going to do? I'm worried about them. Are they going to get sick? What are they going to eat? Like, how's it going to affect their tummies? And they were completely fine. And I found it was harder for someone like me who's more accustomed to this because you just mentally psych yourself out, right? Yeah. And it's a testament to just, giving opportunity. And I say it with kids as an example, but using that as a segue, it's about just believing in the human capacity. And I find too often we are limiting or we try and limit what others can do. But if you just say, no, you can figure this out, I believe in you, that belief of empowerment as an employer or anything else, or just as a society, even with your friends, when they want to do something, instead of saying, oh, well, what about this? What about that? Why not say, no, sure, give them the pros and cons, but also say, I believe you can figure this out. That motivation is so inspiring. And I feel like a lot of people don't go to be entrepreneurs or people don't pursue their dreams just out of fear and a limiting belief. Whereas if you say, I can do it, how much more... Because the brain is a funny thing. Like if you just have that positive mindset of, I can do this, I can get this done.
We need, as humans, failures. To me, what we always discuss is that you need mistakes and failures because those are the raw material required to make the good next decision. If you don't make a lot of mistakes, we were talking about promissory notes and some stuff going on in real estate land here in Canada. And we've all been down that path. I remember making some investments in mining companies in the early 2000s when my buddy told me, buy this at 30 cents. It's going to go to 45 cents by Tuesday. Instead, it went bankrupt by Wednesday or whatever, right? And like we've all done these things and you almost need to make these mistakes. If you don't make enough mistakes, you don't have a big enough context to make the next accurate move. And it's weird. It's like people leave school and then they kind of enter this world where they're scared to quit their job. They're scared to invest in a property. They're scared to look at something like Bitcoin. They're scared to look at an investment that, they're not used to. You're right. It's like there's this weird thing in human nature where people kind of shut down as soon as they leave school, and keeping open-minded is really important. In your practice, do you get exposed to entrepreneurs who talk to you about this, or I guess not really? Do you get exposed to some entrepreneurs who reflect on their lives a little bit and say, hey, I'm glad I did this, or I wish I'd not done that?
For sure. I mean, I'm fortunate based on the location of my practice in Burlington that a large number of my clients are business owners and people who've been successful, and some of them who are now transitioning into passing it on or retiring, and some who are starting out. And it's very fascinating having those conversations because my role, honestly, it's weird. Like I'm not a transactional lawyer. I'm not just doing the real estate transaction. I work as a GC. So like they often call me for like random things. Like I had a client call me the other day saying their family doctor was retiring, help him find a family doctor. So then I'm going into my Rolodex. So it's a weird thing. Like it's got nothing to do with law, but that's just the service we offer.
You're a connector.
Yeah, because I mean, I've built up a network. People think, oh, well, Hussein knows people. Maybe they can help me, and I like to help because that's exactly why I do my practice. I live my creed.
Can you help with my golf swing, or no? That's a different discussion.
Oh, no, that requires a lot.
I know.
That's a full-time job.
Keep going.
But just you going to your point about failure and how you experience failure. Have you ever read Walter Isaacson's biography on Da Vinci?
Not Da Vinci. No,
Da Vinci one.
He died.
We've read multiple of his biographies. Just finished Elon Musk's, both of ours.
And I think Da Vinci is his best one. And I think for me, the books that basically make you stop and you're like, wow, this is actually affecting how I'm looking at the world and thinking about things. Seeing Da Vinci's story and how he went through things and all the different avenues of life he pursued, and how many of them are just driven by failure. And today he's regarded as one of the greatest geniuses that ever lived on so many different platforms that people have no idea that he did this and he did that. And in truth, like, as an artist, he had very few paintings because he never finished anything because he kept thinking they were garbage and they were not good enough because he was such a perfectionist, right?
Interesting.
And just the way he studied things, and like the way he used to go and study birds and watch them for hours and hours, day after day after day, to understand. So that when you look at the way he draws feathers and stuff, it's like almost completely perfect because he spent so long, viewing the minutia of the detail. And for me, I'm like, if someone, one of the greatest people that's lived, has left his mark almost 6 centuries now after the fact, you're like, holy crap, like, you know what? Embrace failure and embrace challenges and be curious. Especially when you're failing, that's when you should be at your most curious, because that's how you will overcome and find the different thing. Because a lot of people, they get discouraged. They're like, oh, well, this is not working. But instead, like, dig deeper. Why is it not working? Because some people walk away from a good idea when they're on the cusp of brilliance, simply because of the mindset. Instead, if you dig deeper, it's incredible what you might discover about yourself and about the subject you're working on.
Does the way our society is the way our society is structured now, where either in a lot of Western countries, everyone's busy. People are running faster and faster. They have access to more information that they won't go through that same process to be able to then internalize and gain the knowledge, because they'll just go to an external source and grab it quickly to a point where, when you just read something quick, you're like, okay, there's the answer.
You get a headline answer.
Yeah. And you don't really understand it versus like thinking about it, or you're just busy. So you're like, okay, I just need someone to do this or whatever. You get it done. I feel like we're losing those craftsmen of and not just artists, but of in all industries. Mm-hmm. We're losing the percentage of people that have deep knowledge of topics is being diminished. And I just wonder if it's the way things are structured right now that is causing people to lean more away from that, or it's harder for them to do it.
It might just be a theme of human history. Look at the pyramids.
It could be.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I'm agreeing with, like, I'm sitting here nodding with you, like agreeing, and then I'm thinking as you're speaking, I'm like, humans just do a good job of there's a cathedral somewhere in Europe that someone was recently visiting, and they were asking their father, who was into these kinds of builds, like, how long would it take to do this? And he turned and answered and said, we don't know how to do this anymore. Like, we don't know how to build a dome like this anymore. We don't know how this dome was built. So I wonder if it's just human nature, but maybe things with technology are extrapolating, where that idea that you're presenting there is happening more and more. Because what happens when AI gets to the point where, like, I find myself, I was kind of trying to figure out the compound annual growth rate of a few things. I know the formula. Didn't even bother to try the formula myself. I'm like, oh, will OpenAI do this for me? Yeah. Plugged in a few variables.
If it's wrong?
And what if it's wrong? Yeah. So we're at a point in history. I was thinking, oh my gosh, how much of my brain am I going to outsource into AI? And then over the long time for humankind, what does that do? Do we all become like jelly numb and mentally slow because we're just so dependent on these machines?
When I went the other week, I was buying a saddle for my daughter. She's into horseback riding, and when I was talking to the guy that was selling it to us, he was just telling me the history, and a lot of these saddles have come from France, and like I was looking at the leather, the craftsmanship, and I'm like, yeah, so this one. He's like, yeah, this model's a bit older. It's worked in though, so there's some benefits to it. I'm like, oh, he goes, and look, he goes, it's similar to like what other people say about, different products. He's like, hey, this is like the handmade one. Like, this is like solid. Whereas the new ones, he goes, I gotta be honest.
The stitching's going to come out.
They're all made in the machines and stuff like that. Like, we just don't have these saddle, these leather craftsmen that we used to have. We'll think about in Italy and stuff like that. I just feel like that's part of humanity that we need. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Could be wrong. Maybe we're on to bigger and better.
I think it's how it's handled and how you approach it. I think it comes down to a balance, right? Definitely artisanship is dying, and it's in all industries. Artisanship is dying. And I think what we need to do to move forward is to actually embrace and go back to actually appreciating the value, and it's happening. Mm-hmm. That's why today, like, if you go and buy like a Stradivarius violin, like, I mean, it's going to cost you an exorbitant amount of money. Or like a lot of Indians buy jewelry, right? And some of the craftsmanship of this old antique gold and the filigree and everything that went into it, it's going at insane premiums right now because there's just nobody there to create it. But I think that we are capable of learning it again. I just don't think there's an interest in recreating it, right? Like using a cathedral example, maybe we don't know how to do it. But, you know, if you said to the Department of Defense that this is going to give you a major national security advantage if you learn how to build this thing, I guarantee you they'll solve that problem. I think they do have the capacity. It's just that, is it worth it to them? You know, because like we're on to other things that matter more. And this is just a little pretty building that, you know, people like to come and see.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So the incentive structure is the way I'm hearing that, is the incentive structure we have for that type of stuff right now is just not in place.
Because the cost of that workmanship is so high that why would they put money there when they can put money into something that monetizes and generates higher returns?
Hussein, you're an interesting guy. I just want to ask you a slightly different question now. Just your background, you're running a law practice in Burlington, you're working with real estate, you know, and other businesses and law and doing all these kind of wild and wonderful things. But then your faith is really important to you. You said in Iraq, what was it that is out of it for Islam there? A lot of important, is it prophets that were buried there?
The tombs. There's the tomb of Ali ibn Abi Talib, who was the cousin of the Prophet and was also married to his daughter. And Shia Muslims revere him. And then his son, Imam Hussein, was martyred in Karbala and is buried in Karbala. So,
and this is a pilgrimage that
Shia Muslims do
once in their lives, once every certain amount of years, as often as you can. Okay, so what role does faith play in your life at this time? Like, you know, obviously well-educated, entrepreneur, running your law practice. What? I don't know if I was going to say like what hole does faith like fill, or what role is your faith serving in your life?
I would almost flip that question in all honesty and say that my life is there to serve my faith. And faith is above all. And everything I do is to basically enhance the faith and to be grateful for being part of my faith. Because for me, it's mental peace. It's gratitude. It gives me an understanding of why I am here in this world.
And how are you defining faith when you say it like that?
Purpose. Reason, you know, that's how I define faith. Something greater than yourself. Because I find that a lot of my friends, people I care about greatly, and even just clients, people, all basically.
You were going to say like you were going to point to me. That's fine.
No, I mean like anyone in my life. And I find that everyone's looking for meaning. Everyone's looking for purpose. And I find that when they don't find it, then they lose their way. They get depressed. You know, you see like people, and it happens to people we all know that, you know, life seemed great for them, but then you hear that they could, you know, either try to commit suicide or do something, not to bring this conversation down. But for me, I find faith it gives you that purpose. It gives you that reason for why you exist. And therefore it allows you to combat depression. Because the way I look at it is, in my faith, I believe in the all-encompassing mercy of God. And if God can be merciful and forgiving for anything and everything, no matter what your transgression is, then there's always hope. And when there's even that kernel of hope, then you will not get stuck. At least for me, I can't speak for others, in that darkest despair that would make you do something that, you know, has no other where you cannot come back from that, right? And it's a difficult subject, you know, and I don't want to hurt anyone or offend anyone by saying that.
No, I don't think you are. It's interesting.
But to me, that's what it is. It's that ability. Because, like, I'll be honest, I have suffered from depression, and I've leaned on faith to, you know, get that hope. And that's the only way you climb out of that hole. Because when you get into that, there's nothing anyone can say to you. It's something that has to come from within to climb out. And it's very hard. And I say that from personal experience.
Was that something that runs in the family, or was that something unique to you that you went through?
I'm not aware of it running in the families, but as far as I know, it's not something that, at least having spoken to my father, it's not something he or my mom have shared or experienced, but it's something unique to me. And it's something that I've had to work through. And it's a day by day, you have to make that effort, you know, to be okay.
Man, you've been through a lot. Hussein, it's interesting what you're saying with faith there, because when we were talking earlier about failures and people being scared to make mistakes, I feel like if you're going through life without a purpose, the mistakes seem really larger than they are. But if you can tie what you're doing to a purpose, those mistakes become opportunities. And I know this is going to sound silly because I'm going to transition from talking about faith to our business here. But I know that we've believed that there's just such a big purpose to what we're trying to do to help people build an asset base that would pull them out of whatever financial, or at least give them the opportunity to have some financial freedom. And to us, there was such a big purpose in doing that. Whenever we were hit with like a roadblock or some big failure of whatever it was, especially in the early years, believing in what we were doing so strongly, it helped me look at whatever was happening that could be considered negative. And I would just say, oh, I wonder how we're going to get through this, because we're going to get through it. And I wonder what's going to be the positive that matches this perceived negative. And I can't wait to reflect on all of this. And then I would just take the next step forward. You know, and it was kind of like this weird way that the little purpose of our little business kind of helped me look at life in a way that when you're hit with the side of the head with like a negative whatever, the purpose of our little business kind of just made me take the next step forward pretty effortlessly. Maybe I shouldn't say effortlessly. Maybe it was a struggle, but it just gave me the energy to just keep taking the next step forward. And I don't want to tie this to like a greater faith, because we're talking at two different levels, but I think there's some similarities in that discussion.
100%. And I see that, you know what, you guys have used your platform, whatever you've been given through whatever entity you might believe in. And that purpose, honestly, whether people agree or disagree with what you guys might be advocating for, you're at least getting them to think about investing and to think about, you know, how do they want their life to look 5, 10, 15 years from now. And I think that's an important service, right? That getting people to think, because and not just in this country, but in a lot of places, if you're just earning a salary and you're living on your salary, you're not getting ahead anymore. This isn't like the 70s and 80s where a nice salary gets you the white picket fence and, you know, you pay for your kids' education, you have your couple of vacations a year. We don't live in that world anymore. So if you're not actually using the money that you earn from your salary or whatever else to invest and grow other sources, right, you're going to be stuck in a very, very difficult situation. If you just look at, and I think we talked about this in the previous time I was on the show.
We did.
Is that, you know, like cost of old age care and all these things that go on. If you're relying on your salary, you have no idea how tough you're going to be looking at situation. And God forbid, you know, if you have health issues or things like that, you know, I wish everyone great health, but it happens. And I see it. Like, you know, I go into old age homes to do wills and things like that. And I see the condition. I see, you know, those who had actually good investments, and it's still not great, but at least it's something. Yeah. And then I see those who have nothing, and I see the condition, and I see how they live. And I'm like, you know what? This is where, you know, if you had made different choices, now some people maybe not, but some people had just taken the time to put something away and invest in whatever you believe in. Make your own choices. Yeah. But just something to create another source of income for when you are not able to earn a salary. It's important. Like that's the takeaway. I always tell. That's why I like coming on the show, because you're not advocating for doing it one way or another way. It's just create forms of passive income. The more, the better, and create those forms that have it for you. Because otherwise, life is going to chew you up. And as people can say as negative as you want, but it's just life. That's just the truth. Like life will be so hard. Yeah.
What you've been fortunate in your life to work with a lot of people who have some serious amounts of wealth. Are there any common traits other than owning assets that you could share from people who look back on their lives that have amassed some wealth? I guess is it just accumulating assets and equity in these assets, and whether a business or a property of some sort? Anything come to mind? I'm putting you on the spot here.
The thing that comes to mind is those who actually are growing their wealth, some stay stagnant. But those who grow are always open to new opportunity and are always taking those ideas, whether it's at the golf club or whether it's with your friends network or whatever it is, they're always willing to invest in something new. They're not stuck in just what they know. They're willing to try something new. And that makes a massive difference, because industries evolve, things change. And so the more diversified you are, the better you're positioned to weather it. You know, because no matter what you believe in, right, things go up and down. Investments are cyclical in any industry. To say that they're not, it's just being facetious. So when you're having the downturn, if you have a need, if you're diversified, usually what you hope, but sometimes it's just everything's going to crap, and that's unfortunate. But usually when
there are those moments, yes.
But sometimes, you know, you hope when one's going down, something else is going up. So that gives you the flexibility if you have needs.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing, is making sure that you're never in a desperate situation.
Yeah.
And
our family had one of those moments in the early 90s, Hussein, when everything was just going down to shit. Like a flaming pile of shit. So we've been in those moments where
those aren't good times.
Those are not fun moments. I don't know if we've ever told you, but CRA froze our family's bank account at one point because our father wasn't paying taxes. And that when you're paying the utility bills out of that bank account, that's always a sketchy moment in your life, you know? Yeah. So yeah, you want some diversity.
But that's the case in point though. Like you still took that and you took curiosity, intelligence, what have you, and hard work, and moved it forward and, recovered from it. And that's the thing. Like I said, it's about that purpose, about that belief. And we talked about the failure. It's about taking that moment of almost failure and saying, no, I can rise from this. I can learn from this. And you took lessons from it. There's things of value you learned. Even though it was a horrible experience for your family, I'm sure there's moments of value that you took from it that you've applied and you've passed on to the next generation, and they'll hopefully pass to the next generation. And that's the point, right? Is how do you treat those moments of adversity and respond to it? Instead of just saying, oh, you know what? I'll never be able to own a home. I give up. I'm just going to be a renter for life. That's not going to solve your problem.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's where my pissed off strategy comes in.
Yeah.
Because I eventually get to the point where I'm like, I just get pissed. I'm not saying, and I'm like, hey, look,
we all use our emotions in different ways.
But that getting to that point is like, all right. And that's when I lay out my plan. Yeah. And then I'm like, okay, because the only thing that gets me from outside of that state, or that stressed out state is I get the plan and I start checking off little boxes. Even if it's the tiniest little step, I feel like I'm making that progress. But sometimes when I've been in those situations, for me, that I need to get to that. We've all got to that point.
I think our greatest change has come from places of frustration and not the personal development feel good. Even though I listen to a lot of Tony Robbins and stuff, if I really reflect on my personal life where I made the greatest moments of change that have affected me the best, they've come from moments of absolute frustration. And maybe the personal development learnings and teachings gave me the confidence to take the next step, but the actual change came from moments of extreme pain in my life.
Yeah, and then when you overcome those, that's when you become more resourceful and more resilient, and that allows you then to go to another level for whatever it is. Like the example I use, which is a very basic example, but the very first property that I bought as an investment property had big crack in the foundation.
You should have seen this thing.
You could see daylight through the
Nick bought a winner.
But that's why I got it for that price. You could literally see daylight through the crack, the part that was above grade of the foundation. You could see daylight right through it.
You needed a good real estate lawyer back then.
But since then, I've dealt with water issues and way more properties than I like to count, but I was dealing with water
issues today. I was going to actually say that earlier. When you said you had a water problem in that property, I'm like, Nick, are you even surprised? We have this running joke that every property we've ever owned together always has a water problem if I own it with Nick. Yeah. It's guaranteed.
But now those issues that were like such a big deal, then I had to overcome it. And then it's like over time, those become nothing. You're just like, oh yeah, I'll deal with that when I deal with that. Like I get to it. Whereas, at the time it's like, oh, it's like the world's falling apart. Mm-hmm. It's those little steps built upon time and time again that matter. And it goes back to what you were saying, I think, when we started this conversation, even about, letting people fail and having to learn from those failures, kind of falling on your face a little bit or getting yourself in bad situations and then having to get yourself out of those situations too, right?
When Hussein was talking about some things, I just had this flashback. I think last time you were here, I think we might have mentioned that I would have loved to live in America in the 1950s or 60s. I think you mentioned a white picket fence, but then I thought maybe I'd rather be like in Scotland during the William Wallace Braveheart era, where you're just going to these battles and you don't know if you're coming back.
Too many people died in those type of fighting.
I sometimes wonder that if I was fighting for what I thought was a purpose, would I care if I came back from the battle or not? I guess if you have a family, it changes and stuff. I know this is like a real weird conversation I just took us to, but those are the two eras that come to mind for me.
I think of the two armies running to each other, and I'm like, who's the flipping guys at the front? Like if I'm in that army, I'm on the back line. I'll wait. I'll eventually get there.
It's kind of like dodgeball as a kid in the gym. You're waiting at the back for everyone else to get annihilated first, and then you come in at the end with the winning blow. Hussein, are there any eras? I definitely didn't prepare you for this. Are there any eras through history that you think you could enjoy living in if you reflect back? I know I'm putting you on the spot. This is a ridiculous question.
Honestly, I have thought about this before. Like it's a weird one, but I thought it would be either again, it's not era, it's also who you are in that era.
Fair.
Right?
Yes.
So I always thought like being a Japanese samurai, like in the Shogun era, like I feel like that would be a very cool life. You know, just like that solitary mystique and
respect.
Yeah. And just that power, you know, like and this, it's such a beautiful country too. Like, you know, you see some of the Shogun palaces and things that are there.
I've never been. You've been to Japan?
Yeah. And like,
is it as nice as everyone says? I hear it's beautiful.
It's nicer.
Clean. It's really clean.
Like it's just, and it's beautiful. Like the countryside is stunning. Like the cities are beautiful. The systems work in a logical way. Like it's just,
I saw a picture of a subway station or video where there was a staircase and everyone coming up from the subway was staying on the right hand side. So, but there was nobody coming down on their left or that person's, it would be their right if they were coming down the stairs, but they still kept clear because that was just like the right way to do it.
It's tremendous discipline. And I think that's something that we could use more of in the West.
Why is discipline? I love that you said samurai. That's a good one. I hadn't thought of that one. Like that one. Yeah. Why is some of the discipline being lost in the West?
I think it comes down to the way we educate our children, to be honest. And I think it comes down to even the way we parent. There's too much entitlement. And like even like schooling, like in a lot of these countries, schooling is on Saturdays as well, right? And here we're trying to cut back and just have less school, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's also what you're teaching your kids in school, right? Like they're actually learning math, they're learning science, they're actually learning how to be disciplined in school.
It sounds ridiculous that we're applauding that. Yes, math. Yes, teach more of that. Yeah.
And I'm just like, because again, like, I mean, I see the standard, right? Or like when I visit friends and I see their kids, I see what at that age they know in those countries. And I'm like, in my opinion, I think the curriculum here needs to be strengthened. But then also, there's so much pushback, right? Like, I mean, I've got clients, right? And they say, I'm furious with my kid's school because, you know what? They said my kid could do better. And I'm like, that's a good thing. Like the fact that you had a teacher say your kid could improve, because normally they just give you whatever they can. Like they give you the between the B and C grades and just, you know, walk away even if your kid isn't even meeting the standards, right? And so like I had one friend, like, I mean, whose kid got a B in math, and she actually went through the curriculum and made him do worksheets, and he was nowhere near the level that the report card was saying. But the teachers are so sensitive to, you know.
Yeah.
Well, from the teachers that I've spoken to in elementary school and secondary, and now I don't know if they're just choosing these stories and that's the ones that, you know, they're remembering, but they feel, or what they've shared with me, is that the amount of pushback they get from parents now is just, it's incredible. Like they can't, you know, they try to say something like that, or some discipline the kids, or sometimes it's just homework. My kid can't, you know, he's got to play hockey 5 times a week. He can't have this homework.
And in defense of the teacher, the poor teacher, for the salary they're making, what they have to put up with, I mean, it's more like the system has created this environment and you got these parents pushing on the teachers, and the teachers really aren't incentivized in any meaningful way to push back strongly. Let's face it. You got 30
But
parents.
hold on, I mean, again, I'm going to be controversial. I mean, you're going to be like, he's a controversial guest on our show. But,
that's why we like you.
But we talk about the teacher salaries, right? And again, yes, teachers should get paid more. You know, my mom was a teacher. Like, you know, I respect what they do. But as a relative to GDP and, you know, average salaries, are teachers really underpaid here compared to other countries? I don't necessarily believe that to be true. Now, I don't have the data, and, you know, someone can look into it or comment, but I don't think teachers necessarily underpaid.
You're going to be roasted now, saying you went and said it. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, listen, like they could get paid, but I'm just saying relative. My only comment is relatively.
Yep.
I'm not sure. So I don't think it's necessarily got to be yes, should they be paid more? But I agree. But I think if you look at it like to what teachers get paid in, say, India, or what teachers get paid in Japan, I don't necessarily think that as you know, I'm pretty sure the salaries would be relatively commensurate. And
so it's just more socially acceptable for teachers in those environments to say, yes, this is the math you need to know and you haven't learned it and this is the mark you get.
I think it's the empowerment, right? Like, I think that like parents, like when I talk to like my friend in Malaysia and like how they're raising their kid, like they're like, they want to know how their kid is performing. They want homework. Like if the kid doesn't bring in a whole bunch of homework, it's like the teacher's in school, the parent is actually going to the teacher saying, where's the homework? You know, and here it's like you said, like, in fact, like I believe it's the Holton board, again, don't quote me on this, but like they try and get the kids to do as much homework in school as much as they can, so they don't bring as much home.
Yeah, is that the philosophy right now? I don't even know. My kids are a bit older.
Again, it's it's anecdotal.
Yeah,
I
sure.
don't know this to be true, but this is what I'm hearing.
It honestly feels like it's true.
Oh, look, my daughter in her elementary school now, so she's in grade 8.
In Halton.
And she hasn't brought home homework, I think, one time this year.
Come on, really?
I swear, and we've been... And
Holy, grade 8.
My wife
I had homework in grade 8.
My wife and I are asking, we're like, what is going on? Now, we just got her report card like last week or a couple weeks ago. She's got, 80s and 90s like throughout. So she's got good grades. And I'm like, so she's like, no, I just do it all in,
they at least
school.
Still do science fair? Well, you have that big, no science fair?
Like that. And she got it. She's like, I just get it done in class. And then I see her screen time in class, which I'm on her about all the time. And I'm like, what are you doing?
How do you see that? That's on her own device that you have
on her own
app?
device. Because they tell them, they're like, okay, you're done. Just go on your phone and do whatever. And I'm like, what? I'm like, what are you talking about?
Holy shit. In the class, they tell them to break out their own phones and just surf?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They play Roblox. She's open with it. She's like, yeah, we're playing Roblox together. They play Roblox in school. I see it on the thing. She can't hide it from me because I see it there, but she's open with me about it. But she's like, Dad, I'm doing all my work. My marks are good. What do you want? And then the way the system is structured, it's like, well, if you're getting good marks and you're getting the work done that they're assigning, then she's doing, what she feels. She's like, well, I'm doing my part. Like I'm doing the performance. And I'm just like, wow, there's like a big, and I'm thinking for grade 9, I'm like, she's going to be ill prepared. So, we're having those conversations trying to do stuff, but it's a.
So Hussein, then are you supplementing anything with your own kids, or do you have a plan?
Yeah, they're young, but like,
I know they're young. So like, what's your thought process?
I'm getting my own materials. I mean, I'm fortunate that my wife is stay at home, so she can actually invest the time and do extra worksheets and get other things and different things that we want. Because like, look, like, I mean, again, like you could disagree or not, but for me, I believe that, when I want my kid to learn as much as they can. And I have no problem being called a tiger dad or whatever, as the saying goes. Because for
what's
me,
a tiger?
I've never heard that term before.
It used to be a tiger mom. Basically, those moms who are always on their kids, pushing them to excel in sports, music.
Oh, got it.
Academics, And I believe that
we call those soccer moms.
And for me, I believe it's really, really important to push your kids to be the best they can. Because I would tell my kids, I don't care if you're the best in your class. I want you to be competitive on a global level. Because ultimately, that's
Especially
the world we
now.
live in. Right? Like, because I'm like, jobs can be done from anywhere. So don't think that just because you're in Canada and there's a job in Canada, there's a kid in Philippines, there's a kid in China who's willing to do that job. So how are you going to beat them out for that job?
Yeah, that's good. I've never had that discussion, I think, with my kids. That's an interesting way to put it too, actually.
Yeah, because for me, that's really important. It's like, I'm not interested in you competing locally. You have to be willing to compete.
Yeah, it's almost like if we can have our kids develop a resourcefulness and resiliency, then they're kind of ready for whatever comes their way. Because I was just thinking, I was reading something with some company that's using AI to replace a lot of their customer service. First of all, I think Air Canada did something with a bot, and the bot responded giving somebody like a refund.
Oh, that's amazing.
Something, and then now the lawyers for Air Canada apparently are saying, no, the bot didn't have the authority. It was like the bot gave some warranty on a flight cancellation. I don't know all the details. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is getting crazy. But some company had an AI doing their customer service. I wish I could remember the name. I just read it yesterday. And the bot was replacing like 210 customer service workers because it was able to handle so many answers. So to your point about a global competitiveness, not only do we have to compete globally, the workforce and the types of jobs are changing. Yeah. Because a lot of these entry-level jobs, like a lot of us came in with entry-level customer service type jobs, let's face it. Mm-hmm. But when a lot of that just gets cleaned off, I don't know what replaces it yet. I was saying a lot of what Nick and I are talking about is that over the next 6 years with the evolution of technology the way it is, it gets a little murky over the next 6 to 10 years on how business evolves. Just because of the pace of technology and productivity and artificial intelligence, there isn't this clear path. Like when I entered the tech world in the late 90s, you could almost see it like, oh, there's this client server model, big databases of information. Oh, we're going to put those databases onto the internet and people will access them through their browser. And then, oh, there's going to be mobile computers and you'll get through. You could kind of sort of extrapolate things a little bit if you were in that industry. And now, because I have a tech background, I always feel like I've stayed somewhat connected. It is somewhat difficult to extrapolate what AI introduces to us because it's like there's the unknown is so large that it's tough to figure out where we go with this. Mm-hmm. I don't know what I'm asking here. I guess I'm just commenting on the state of things as we're observing them.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is. And I think part of it is just being willing to observe, being willing to assess and see what the world is for what it is. right? And we're changing. We're going through some of the fastest changes in the way we live and what we have available to us. And the thing is, because it's being done in a bit of a subtle way, like before it was done like microwaves got smaller and ovens got more. It was very obvious, that evolution, like TV sets, they went from being these like 200-pound behemoths to being these tiny little things. You could see it, but now when it's being done behind the scenes, where the evolution is being done, where it's not tangible necessarily, because the tangibleness has already reached such levels of efficiency. There's only so much you can do, right? Like how much thinner can they make a laptop? You know what I mean? Like it's limited. But what the laptop can do is changing almost on a daily basis in exponential ways.
Have you seen OpenAI's new video editing where with a prompt you can get like little movie scenes now? So you could say, show me a hawk flying through a forest and then above a mountain or something, and it'll give you the whole little clip. And it's that kind of thing.
It's amazing. Like even something like Canva, right? Like I used to use Canva like when it first came out. And now you can tell Canva's AI, like, hey, I want to have a image with a clock with some money. Done instantly. And I'm like, it's just unreal, like what tech can do. And again, it's about embracing it, but also using it in a healthy way. And I think part of the biggest challenge for our leaders coming forward in the next 5 years and maybe less is setting the parameters and the rules around AI. And also, how do you safeguard people from, because there's going to be bad actors, always bad actors. How do you safeguard the general population from the abuse of bad actors?
Well, there's already, I mean, if you look at certain videos and audios online, you can't, there's already, you have to, everything you look at, you're like, well, is this real or fake? Are my eyes playing a trick on me?
I think some big influencer had a fake sex tape go out. Oh, I don't know the name, but a couple of weeks ago, I think somebody there, and
didn't they do it to Taylor Swift?
I think there was also a Taylor Swift kind of thing. That's right.
Yeah, there was they used AI with.
I think it was like a sex tape or something like that. You're right. So
but there's an Instagram account that's an Instagram model that is basically artificial intelligence bot and artificially created images, and has followings and has sponsorships and is like earning income from this account.
Yeah, that ad agency out of Spain actually will license you this person so that they will promote your product using this AI. It's not even a real person on Instagram, but they have a following. Yeah, it's kind of like...
I mean, there's a reason the term deepfake is now part of the English dictionary.
Oh my God, this US election in the fall.
I mean, the stuff that's going to come out.
Oh, geez. Can you imagine around September, October, leading into that vote, what we're going to see?
And the real stuff that the Trump campaign puts out sometimes kind of like...
the real stuff's like just... And that's what makes it so difficult.
So that's what I mean. Then you won't know what's real, what's fake, because some of the crazy things...
Well, the Biden stuff too. Like now, if you see Biden stumble on a video, I'm like, okay, is that really him? Or did somebody make an AI video of him stumbling just for fun,
But even that, like all this ageism and all that bullshit, I'm like, you know what? Like we're trying to take it to a level that just doesn't make sense, right? I'm like, you know what? If you have an ageist thing, that's fine. But someone stumbling, someone making a mistake on their speech, I guarantee if you and I were recorded over everything we said and every step we took during the day, I'm sure if people spliced it up, I mean, we would probably look like we had like some significant
sometimes I can't get my words out at all.
I do spin in circles. Sometimes I leave my office. I'm like, oh, no, I'll go back here. No, I'll leave after. So.
And that's what I'm saying, right? Like, I mean, how many times have we been at a restaurant where we might spill on ourselves or something? Like, I mean...
Hussein being the voice of reason. Yeah, thank you for being the voice of reason.
Hey, to your point about technology, though, I think what might come out of this, like if you look at what happened with the databases and the tech stuff, and maybe it's not the same with this, but like their whole industry was built like tech support. There was a career path that was when the industry started. This
tech support, then a programmer,
or project manager, right? And so this whole kind of like career path and industry was built. And maybe even with AI, I know it's a little bit different, but it's kind of not at the same time. Like there could be other things there too, and it might allow people to do other things. Who knows?
I agree. Yeah, for sure.
But the worrying trend is like to me is like the real kind of starters, some like the retail and stuff like that, like when you take those numbers and you wipe out those numbers, like you are talking about a big number of people impacted.
And maybe humankind's going to be faced with a big realization that this world exists now to grow the GDP. Like that's basically the world, the way it exists. Every country grow the GDP. We might be entering a time where it's just not going to be possible to use a money system that's based on debt that must grow. And we're going to have to change things because not everyone's going to be able to have a job and grow the GDP.
Yeah. I just want to commend Hussein on something quick as you say that, because we're 49 minutes in, it looks like, and you've been discussing enough different things that Tom hasn't started going into Bitcoin yet. So
No,
that's
we talked about it before we started
that's
recording.
Probably a new record.
I got to him before we started recording. Don't worry, I slipped in the Bitcoin conversation. But Hussein, I wanted to talk to you about I guess some like recent legal or real estate news, just for learning exercises. What are you seeing? And I'm not asking you to share anything specifics, but some in the news around the real estate world here in the Ontario area, there's been like different mortgage stuff. We don't even have to get into the details of it. Just what lessons are you seeing through your office that maybe people can take away and learn from when it comes to lending money and real estate investing? Can you share anything?
Yeah, I'm going to share 3 points that I think are really important for people who are looking to get into real estate, whether it's lending, whatever. Do your due diligence. And when I say due diligence, I don't mean just the due diligence on the deal or the property. Do it on who you might be partnering with, who you're lending money to. Make sure you do that. And I would say, especially the age when you talked about all this tech, you have people, you have shared contacts. See who you know mutually. Go and contact them and say, what has been your experience? What is your relationship with them? Pay for that coffee, pay for that lunch. You can save yourself a lot of money by doing the basic due diligence. B, don't make decisions on your own. There are professionals out there like your lawyers, your accountants, your realtors, your mortgage brokers. They have a network. So even if you don't know someone and they may not know the person directly, they can reach out and help you do that due diligence. So that's my first point, is about knowing who you're getting involved with. 2, paper it properly. A lot of people go in on these fly-by-nights, these crappy promissory notes that they get online, or whether it's wills, whatever they're doing, JV agreements, from Blockstore or whatever site there is out there right now. They don't address your situation, what your expectations are. So you might see an agreement that looks great and has all this legal jargon. So you're like, oh, well, this looks good. It's got some legal words in there.
That's how I would think in the past, yes.
But who is actually addressing what are the key metrics of your deal? Is it the timeline? Is it the exit? Is it the return of capital? Is it that when do you get profit participation? How does that look like? That's really important to make sure those things are captured in there, right? And then the third thing, and actually going back to the second point, promissory notes. A lot of people electronically sign promissory notes. Now, in truth, and I'm going to be very clear, courts will probably enforce them. But there is a bulletin from the Ontario Attorney General that says that he says negotiable instruments, and it specifically names promissory notes, cannot be signed electronically. And when the Attorney General is saying that that's not acceptable, why take the risk? Why have to potentially litigate to just enforce the validity of your note?
Oh, geez, yeah.
So, right? Like, be smart. Like,
I don't understand in what circumstance.
Hussein has a third point.
Oh, sorry.
No. Go ahead. I just want him to forget the third point.
Sorry, I'll just finish off. And then the third point is understand the deal you're getting into. Understand your why. Always have a very clear why. Don't do real estate investing because Hussein told you or Tom told you that this is the right way to go. Do it because it makes sense for your objectives, your purpose, and your family situation entirely.
Oh, so because you're seeing that then. You're seeing people do it with the wrong why.
Yeah, they don't have a why. They're like, well, my neighbor bought a property and he made X on it. And I'm like, okay, but that doesn't mean that you're going to.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't have a reason, you don't understand, because if you don't have a why, you're not going to understand the nitty gritty of how to make
into the deep
work.
knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah. Then you get into speculation, and people made a lot of money. Don't get me wrong, in the speculation stage when everything was just skyrocketing. But now we're seeing in the pullback market that the speculators are now hurting badly, right? And they're looking for everyone to blame. And now we're seeing also that innocent people get hurt because they trusted the speculators and their thing. And often, like when I first started being a lawyer, and it pissed off a lot of people when I told my clients to ask this question, is because people would always say, well, I've got a track record of X return. I've got a track record of X return. And I'm like, that's wonderful. But I always tell my clients, go ask them this one question. How does your return match up to the average market return for the market you're in? If that person has consistently outperformed the market, then let them do it. But if they're saying they get 18% returns, but the market's gone up 22%, they're actually underperforming what the average is. Now, did they seem as good? Because everyone gets wowed by the 18%, 30%, whatever it is, right? Because property prices are going up so much. So I'm like, did you capture even the average of what your neighborhood was doing, what your street was doing? And I'm like, get into that data, because someone can honestly tell you that, then there's someone worth following. But otherwise, everything else out there, it's a bunch of noise. It is a bunch of people just wanting to part you with your money.
Some of the stuff that you've dealt with, just by the way you're talking, you could tell he's dealt with
you
shit.
And one thing I just never understood, to me, was always like a golden rule of real estate, is I don't understand, other than if I was going to lend money to like Tom or someone that I have a very close relationship with and I have a lot of trust in. Like, it's not just someone that I've met and I feel like, oh yeah, I think he's a good guy. And maybe that's just who I am as an investor. But in real estate specifically, why as a lender would you ever really look at lending on a promissory note versus getting some security? Like, I just feel like the circumstances on that have to be extreme for me to be willing to extend someone.
Is there some reason that got popular?
Because two reasons. Lack of knowledge and education, where everyone said, oh, well, everyone's doing it, without anyone actually verifying who are the people doing it and who was promoting it. They just said everybody's doing it, so people just followed like sheep. That's one. And the second is they promised crazy returns. They're promising 15%, 17%. And people just focus. And because you get that first check, it's like a Ponzi scheme almost. I'm not saying it is. Again, I don't want to get into trouble. But it's almost that thing where you promise returns. And then you have the other sheep who follow. And you use their money to basically, meet those returns.
Classic human nature.
Yeah. Right? And people are like, oh, well, I'm making 17%. And then they think you're an idiot for saying no, right? And that you're just jealous of their success. That's why you're telling them to be careful.
Oh, my God. Totally.
But I've heard that.
I know. I've heard the same thing over the years.
Yeah, because people tell me, oh, well, you just don't want to do it, or you can't afford to do it. I've heard all sorts of
We've had people walk in, not to this office, but when we were younger in our business, and say, you guys don't know how to make the big money in real estate. Mm-hmm. Because we just believed in buying property, holding on for the long term. Somebody the other day gave me the weirdest backhanded compliment. They said, I
got the same one.
Did you?
Yeah.
They said, I've been given a lot of thinking over the year or lately. And, I've looked at or considered Rockstar and a bunch of other real estate stuff. And you know what? Rockstar's definitely the most boring. And I'm like, yeah, well, that's what we kind of like. Like, we want to be very boring, but as best as I can tell, you guys have taken care of your clients the best way.
Oh, I didn't get the boring part. I just got the same thing. I've been thinking about it and I've really analyzed a lot of things, and it feels like the Rockstar investors really finish the furthest ahead. Or they get the best, or they do the best, or something like that.
And I want to be careful saying what we're saying right here. Hussein, just also in front of you, we believe everyone should do their own research. Okay. And if we can facilitate and help share some of our experiences and give our opinion, we want to, but we want everyone to make their own decision. So whatever anyone has earned through us, rightly or wrongly, it's on them. And if we can facilitate by introducing them to Hussein, or us sharing like, hey, we wouldn't buy this property because here's what happened to us. So, if you do it, just, go in eyes wide open. We want to maybe play that role, but we will never take credit for anyone's success.
They're the ones.
This is on them, and I'm not trying to pass the buck here. We just want people to have a deep understanding of what they're doing and why they're doing it, so they go in eyes wide open into this stuff.
Well, they're the ones doing it. You got to give credit where credit's due.
So you can't really say, and that's why I didn't like it when this particular person said, "Oh, Rockstar investors are the most boring." It's not that. It's everyone's doing their own thing, and everyone's short-term objectives financially are very different. Like Hussein's short-term financial objectives are very different than the next person's, and your long-term financial goals are also very different than the next person. So there's no one answer to anything.
Well, and to what you were saying earlier, like even from an investing side, you were talking, Tom, about the mining stock that was at 15 cents and 30 went bankrupt. We've all done those types of things, and we've seen what our parents went through with real estate, and it kind of impacted our family a lot too. So I think we've our investing style, or the type of education that we, or whatever catalyst we try to give people, is very conservative because of those lessons that we talked about earlier, because we've seen them kind of blow up a little bit, and some of it impacted us directly. And that's kind of morphed the way we think to more of a long-term principle driven approach for our stuff. And it's why, even though sometimes you can, if you're on the sidelines during these times when everything's going up and you're like, oh my God, I'm missing out on this and this, when there is the pullback, you're like, oh my God, I'm not one of the people swimming naked. I'm actually, I'm good that way. So it's a tough time to stay away from that stuff during those times when there's easy money and a number.
You get the emotional emotional pull,
Yeah, it's
like
tough.
Hussein was mentioning. You get that emotion like, oh, well, am I missing out? What don't I see?
Yeah, there's a secret over there that I don't know, right?
And it's people trust. Like people want to find people to trust. And often the people who are selling trust, and I literally call it selling trust, are the people you should trust the least, right? Those people who are selling these programs and what have you and things like that. And they're not all wrong, don't get me wrong. But again, even that, like before you're going to trust someone to teach you real estate investing or, whatever you want to learn about, make sure they're qualified. Make sure what is their track record in delivering results and push to ask. And if they don't like answering those questions, you make your decision. What does that tell you?
Mm-hmm.
Something else that
Because I guess on that point, if you ask those questions and you don't like the answers, I guess you could still proceed. It's just you need to ask those questions.
well, then you're going in. Eyes wide open.
Then you're not getting caught off guard, and anything that happens is on you. Right?
Yeah.
You've asked the question.
Like, listen, I respect that everyone's money is their own to do what
Sure.
they wish with,
Yeah.
right? And all I try to do is I use, similar to what you guys do, is like I use whatever limited platform God has given me and experiences have given me is to say, you know what? These are things I've experienced. These are my thoughts. Take them for what they are. I don't have all the answers. I'm not the smartest guy you will meet, but I just sharing what I know.
One image has always stuck with me was there was there was like control with a no smoking sign on top of it, right? So basically no control equals risk. And it's just that simplicity, that image has always stuck in my brain.
Oh, you mean the control with like a circle around it and a cross through it?
Cross through, like the no smoking sign.
Yeah, got it. So like you have no control.
So like no control equals risk. And it was, and it's always stuck with me because my belief is that no one will ever take care of my money the way I will. It doesn't matter who it is and how much I trust them.
Absolutely.
And every, instance I give over, I know that if I'm giving up control, I'm taking on more and more risk. Doesn't matter the return, whatever it is, that's where the risk is. And it's just something that's always stuck with me. And maybe I'm a control freak in some ways, maybe not, but it's just, it doesn't mean that I don't still invest and give money to other people and get a return from that. But it just, when I do it, I feel like I'm aware of that risk. And it's not just like, well, this is guaranteed. I'm going to on the paper, it says I'm going to get this return. So I'm going to get this return. I'm like, I realize that, hey, maybe not. Right.
Mm-hmm. I have one last question. We can begin to wrap up, Hussein. Nick is very good at, we're very different in the way we make decisions with money and in business. Nick is very good at running numbers and looking at the details of something. And I'm much more the person who does something on feel. Mm-hmm. Like if I meet someone, ask them some questions and kind of just the exchange I get. And I will invest sometimes, and we laugh at it because it seems ridiculous. I'm like, no, this is, and I will literally use the words, this feels right to me.
Mm-hmm. And I'll be like, let me at least look at the investment package. Like, let me see something.
I'm like, we don't need the investment. I spoke to him. I got a good, we're good. Hey, we're good. So when you hear that from me or from Nick, and then just with your background and what you've been exposed to, does anything come to mind in general when you hear that from us?
In what sense?
Is it ridiculous the way I speak when I say, hey, I'm going to do something off feel?
No, I think that, you know what? If you were doing it alone, I'd say, yeah, you're insane. But also if you're doing Nick's approach, I would say if that was all he was doing, that was it. That's also insane.
That's true.
Got it. Okay,
like
fair.
The yin and the yang, because sometimes you need that qualitative feel, and then you need the quantitative. And then you have to balance it as to say, how do you want to weight it? And each person is going to weigh that differently.
Sure. So we've been a good team in that regard.
Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of it, is basically like sometimes where you're going over on the qualitative, he can use the quantitative to rein you back.
Fair.
And if he's on the quantitative, he's like, I don't know, but you're like, no, I think this guy is a good guy. I see potential here. And on the relationship side, and you're like, that's why we're going to do it. That's the other reason to do it. Because on the quantitative, you'd be like, this doesn't feel totally like a home run, so I might not do it if it's just purely a quantitative analysis.
Yeah.
And in anything, you have to look at the qualitative and the quantitative.
Yeah, that's a good breakdown. Hussein, anything else that you wanted to share? Thank you for coming here. I feel like you're always up to interesting things. There's a few things that Nick, I'm going to follow up off the recording to talk about with Hussein, what he's up to over the next few days. But anything else that you want to share while we're here?
Honestly, it's just that, you know what, we're in an interesting market time right now, and especially for people who are looking to get into real estate. Find the right deals, but do your due diligence. I know we've talked about this, and I'm re-emphasizing the point, but I've seen a lot of people, good people, get hurt. And all I'm saying is be smart about your due diligence and plan. Don't just plan to buy for today. What is the plan long term? And that means about getting your wills in place. That means about getting your documentation in place. Like Nick made a point about that, if he was lending to you or, doing business with you or someone close, he would trust. But there's no guarantee that you necessarily will be around forever. So even then, I'm saying, even if it's someone you trust implicitly, still put the good documentation together, because you never know who you might end up in bed with if that person's no more. You might say, oh, well, it's their wife. I like their wife too. But what if something happens to both of them? You don't know who then is going to be managing their estate, and now suddenly you're in bed with them. So having the right paperwork and making sure that your position is protected at all times is really important. So make sure you're not relying on boilerplates. I'm sick and tired.
Okay, so and is that what you're spending a lot of time with at your practice, fixing a lot of the boilerplate stuff and setting people up with proper wills and estate planning with regards to their businesses and real estate?
Or unfortunately, sometimes it's connecting them to litigation lawyers, because they're already now in a mess that is not going to be solved through redrafting a contract, because the other side's not going to agree. And now you just have to find a way to extricate yourself from this problem. And it's expensive. Litigation in Canada is very, very expensive and very, very slow. Everyone knows about the LTB. The court system is not much different. And I'm like, when you have your biggest investments potentially, which real estate often is, can you afford to have it tied up like that? Mm-hmm. What is that going to do? Maybe you survive it, but what is the opportunity cost, even if you survive it, in terms of what you had to give up, what you missed out on?
Lot to think about. Hussein, so can you, for anyone who is new to you, what do you like to do with your practice? Who are your ideal clients? Can you map it out?
My clients are business owners or investors who are looking for basically someone who reviews contracts, drafts contracts, and provides solid advice. But honestly, if you need help, just give us a call. If we can't help you, we will connect you with someone who can.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about you. What is your URL? Do you even know your website URL?
At HSKLawFirm.ca.
Okay, HSK.
And our Instagram is at HSKLawFirm too.
HSKLawFirm, okay, on Instagram, and .ca for the website.
Correct.
Okay, so we'll link to both of those. Hussein, thanks for doing this. I really always enjoy chatting with you. Just enjoy your perspective on things. And thank you for taking the time. I know you're super busy, so we really appreciate this, man. Feel grateful to have crossed paths.
Yeah, likewise. The feeling's very mutual.
Yeah. Thanks. Hey, thanks for tuning in. You can find every new episode of the Your Life, Your Term show on all the major streaming platforms. So Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. And if you'd like to get free copies of some of the books that we've put together, like these right here, or some of the reports that we've put together, like these right here, you can find all of those at www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's it for now. Until next time, your life, your terms.